Welcome to In Focus. I'm your host, Yesenia Taveras. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention released a report in 2015 that investigated the causes of gun violence in Wilmington, Delaware. City Council President Hanifa Shabazz requested the CDC report, and in 2016, the Wilmington Community Advisory Council was created to address youth gun violence based on the 2015 CDC report. Recently, Wilmington Mayor Przicki and Police Chief Tracy released the official 2019 year-end report on policing and crime in Wilmington, Delaware, which revealed a total of 89 shooting incidents, reflecting an increase from the 72 incidents in 2018, but a 46% decrease compared with 2017. President of Wilmington City Council Hanifa Shabazz and the Wilmington Community Advisory Council Coordinator Dr. Gwen Angalet joins us today to discuss how the Wilmington Community Advisory continues to address the root causes of gun violence, toxic stress and trauma, behavioral health, unemployment, neighborhood safety, and much more. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for joining us. Gun violence, as we know, is something that's happening throughout our entire country. Last year was a year that, we've seen so many things happening at concerts, in our neighborhoods. So the Wilmington Community Advisory had actually received the CDC report in 2015. And I want to take it back to 2015 because this is kind of where everything was birthed. Mm-hmm. And but before we get into the Wilmington Community Advisory Council and the tremendous gains that we've been seeing in strides, I want to talk about the women that are behind the titles. Mm-hmm. So one great thing we do on In Focus, that we constantly do on In Focus, we give our guests the opportunity to share a little bit about who they are to our viewers, so it's not always just about the titles and the ranks that we hold. So with that being said, President Shabazz, if you can go first. I know you've been with our youth since the beginning of ages, and our community has always been in your heart. But talk to us a little bit about President Hanifa Shabazz, but the person that we also see in our community.
Well, thank you first for the opportunity to come and share about the great work that we've done. I would call it passion work that we've done with the Wilmington Community Advisory Council. And it goes back a little farther than 2015 to 2013, really, when I really made the first call. As a woman, person born and raised in the city of Wilmington, going through the many changes that Wilmington has gone through, I too am not void of the experience of the gun violence. And it has hit me personally, in my family, and family, friends, and community. I have been doing work in the community before I got into public service. I always was interested in to make sure that we understood who we were, our contributions to the city of Wilmington, and what we can do and continue to keep Wilmington moving forward. So not from the dealing with our young people through the African Festival, the bookstore, my restaurant and drumbeat, just to name a few things that I've done before becoming into public service, that I knew that the nature of our community was changing. And were we creating and making sure that we was leaving an environment for our young people to grow and thrive. Seeing that the way that our young people are growing and going into a lifestyle of violence and dysfunction, inadequate education, graduation rates were going down. I knew there was something that was happening, that we were not making sure that we was creating an environment for our young people to grow and thrive. And when the ugly head of violence hit my family, I don't know if people know that one of the youngest persons who was shot when this whole ravaging violence began was my grandchildren's uncle. Okay. His last family name was Brown, and then it continued. It came back to the family again when one of my grandchildren's uncle was shot under 95. When my grandson's father was also in that involvement with the missing of Damon Emery. So this violence has affected me and affected my children. So I have a close-up view of the trauma that it leaves on our young people. And then as it continued to spread through the city of Wilmington, affecting us more and more and more, I couldn't stand by and not do something. And because I saw that we were acting outside of our nature, our children were committing violence and demonstrating examples of dysfunction and illness. And the data proved that.
That's right.
The data proved that. So I've sent many reports, because we've done many task force and reports, on the educational issues of our children, on the housing of our children, the infant mortality rate, our domestic abuse. And I sent all that data to the Center for Disease Control because I felt that our children were suffering from mental illness, as the young people in southern Delaware were an epidemic proportion of committing suicides, and the children here was committing, up in the north, were committing homicides. And it just, a light came on, and I said, well, let's try that to see if, the mental illness is demonstrated in our children and the service we're providing and the environment that we're creating, why are our children not growing to thrive but committing such destruction? And therefore, I made the call and requested the Center for Disease Control to investigate that, and it worked.
Wonderful. And we're going to get into more details with that. But before we do, Dr. Angalet, could you also share with us your personal journey? Because you're affiliated with Wilmington Community Advisory Council, and it's more in a sense of your expertise too. You have over 30 years of experience with our youth here in our community. Tell us a little bit about who you are, the woman who's behind the doctor title.
Well, I have been, and I say this, I feel privileged to have been able to do and have the experiences, the opportunities to help our young people. Young people are my passion. I often say I don't have any children of my own biologically, but I have lots of children that I've interacted with over the years, and lots of students that I've tried to help, move forward in their college careers. So young people are near and dear to my heart. And it's almost like having a calling. And I feel like I was called to do this work. I spent several years in state government working in the children's department, with some of our most severely, children who experience extreme severe needs, if you will, being involved with, the abuse and neglect, delinquency, severe mental health issues. And so I've seen it up close and personal, if you will, in the kids department. But I always felt like I wanted to be more involved on the prevention side, to really help young people get on the right track, stay on the right track, and kind of go upstream, if you will. Because I'd been in deep end services for a long time. So then I had an opportunity to go and work in prevention at Nemours Children's Health System. And that gave me that opportunity, gave me another set of experiences to have. And so when I left Nemours, I was offered this opportunity. The council was just getting started. President Shabazz was, working with then Secretary Rita Landgraf and her deputy Henry Smith to create this council that came out of the CDC report. And they said, would you like to come help? And I said, oh, this is tailor-made for me. God had it in his plan that this is my next step on the journey. And I'm just so pleased to be a part of this. I feel privileged.
And it's wonderful to see so many women too, but I really appreciate the two of you sharing your journey, because I want our viewers to see that it's individuals like yourselves that are joining together, partnering together to really tackle these hard issues that's facing our communities. And with that being said, let's get right into it with the 2015 CDC report. In the beginning of this, what was it, President Shabazz, that you saw in there that you knew right away you had to act upon this, you had to create something, you had to partner with other people? What was it that really just spoke to you that you knew something had to happen to make change?
Well, when we got the results, the findings, and really went through the whole presentation of how they came to their findings, it was like they said, it was a confirmation of what I believe we already seen and known, especially by the data that we sent for them to include in their investigation. But we knew, I knew it was fixable. I believe it's fixable. And that the many different experiences and that our young people are having to experience, especially in the educational area. We know that we need to fix our educational system, and to say that the education component, the data dealing with the many interactions that young people had in the educational system, it's something that we have been challenging and been advocating for change in quite some time. And then to see the other synchronized events that the test pilot demonstrated were also things that we knew needed to be done. So it was no way to know that we had this data, that we things that we kind of already knew, and then also to know that we had the resources and abilities to make change. There was no way that we could just take this report and put it on the shelf. That, you know, once we got a chance to talk with, we worked with Dr. Gwen and Dr. Smith and the many other organizations that came around the table, I believe we all were jointly agreed upon that we could make this happen, that we had to put this into action.
Okay. And for those who don't know or understand the works of the Wilmington Community Advisory Council, what is it? How was it formed? Who's involved? What organizations are we looking at here?
Want to take that one?
Yeah, I will. Well, one of the recommendations that came out of the report was to create a community advisory council. And we took that very seriously. We reached out to a variety of stakeholders within state government, within the community, within local organizations, and we reached out to youth. And we said, help us think through this. And the CDC report really focused on young people who are already in trouble, you know, and how to help them overcome those challenges and get back on the right track. Our advisory council said, you know, we certainly want to work in that area. We absolutely want to help the young people who are already in trouble. But we want to go upstream. We want to look at ways that we can prevent this in the first place. And what are those steps that we need to take to do that? And we spent many hours and many days looking at the evidence-based practice. What was the data telling us? You know, and use that to formulate 6 recommendations. And those recommendations kind of span the gamut from, from prevention and looking at young people who were just virtually at risk because of where they lived. And then we looked at those young people who were experiencing challenges in school, you know, and on the verge of something happening if we don't do something now, if we don't interrupt that cycle. And then we had recommendations focused on those young people who were in trouble and helping them get back on track. We also said that we had to look at creating safer environments for our kids. What are those systemic issues, those environmental issues that really get in the way of our young people being able to achieve their maximum potential, and their families to help them to do that? You know, and we also looked at policy change, because ultimately when you're trying to change systems, you've got to look at the policies that are getting in the way and keeping our young people from being the very best that they can be.
That's right. And what was the significance in changing the name from Community Advisory Council to Wilmington Community Advisory Council?
We were the CDC Community Advisory Council at first.
Okay.
And because as we evolved, we are not a part of the Center for Disease Control. We did not want to continue to carry that name because we were doing work that was not as a part of the Center for Disease Control.
Okay.
And we also wanted to focus our focus was that on Wilmington, so we took on the name of Wilmington Community Advisory Council.
Okay, and so we have our youth involved, ages between 13 to 24 and a little bit older. I mean, we all like to say we're young at heart, but let's talk a little bit about like who's involved. I know there's over hundreds of organizations and other individuals who are key leaders in our community. Like, what's the big picture here with WCAC?
Well, and you can add on to this, Gwen. I mean, we're a large, holistic group of individuals from across the sectors. I would say all of the components of what's necessary making a well-rounded child: education, the healthcare, employment, the public safety, mental health, housing. We have a great cadre of individuals from all across. I think the whole. Local government, nonprofit, just individuals, our youth groups, our social services, because that's what is needed to be able to get the advice and to look at this situation, this epidemic, in a very holistic manner to make sure that we are going to create, solutions and best practices to address the dysfunctions in those areas and make an environment for our children to grow and thrive.
That's right. And there's some key points that I wanted to make sure that we also touched on while we were here. because there's so many goals that the WCAC has with all of these people coming together, all these organizations, individuals, and you touched on some too, Dr. Gwen, in regards to fostering the violence-free environment, things of that nature. But there's so many components with WCAC. We have the goals, we have the guiding principles with the youth and young adults and their families. We have the population level results. How was this broken down into these different categories? And I really want to get into zip codes in a little bit, but the goals that you have here written, how was that thought about? Are these things that you knew right away that you had to tackle? These were the most permanent things in our community that needed to be addressed?
It really came from listening. Listening to what the community was saying to us. We had focus groups. We brought in leaders from the nonprofits, working in the city. We had focus groups with young people. We had focus groups with parents. We went to fair school. We went to and talked with a lot of people to get the input, if you will, the information to help guide those recommendations. But we also looked at what was happening in other communities. How are other communities tackling this? And what we found pretty much was that everybody was kind of in a similar spot.
Okay.
Everybody was looking at the data and trying to put together a plan and in the early stages of implementation. So we kind of drew from what they're thinking, but realized that we really had to make this of and about, and for Wilmington young people. So we were guided very much by what we heard through those sessions.
Okay. Did you want to add to that, President Shabazz?
Well, I think she covered it very well. I mean, the biggest part of how we got to where we were was listening. I mean, we had dedicated individuals who came to meetings, and for hours on a regular basis, and everyone just poured into the table, the information and the perspectives, and we got been able to take what we heard from the various focus groups and talking to the youth themselves, and how do we apply and help us to stay at that lens as we continue to do the work.
And that's a great thing to hear, because you're having our constituents, our residents, at the table. And these are people who, like you mentioned in your own personal story, President Shabazz, that are breathing and living all these incidents and this trauma that's happening within our community. So now, not only are they living through it, but from what I'm hearing, they're actually having a say as well in regards to the changes they want to see in our community.
Yeah. But our goal is to work with the community, not at the community or for the community. We very much understand that we want to start from the bottom up and be inclusive of the people that we are affecting, to make sure that just not us suits or making the decisions, but we're listening to those who are actually walking, talking, and breathing it every day. Yes, I said I had a personal experience with it, but nowhere near to the magnitude that individuals who's are living it on a more frequent basis than I am, or have access to resources that I might have. I think that's one of our prized possessions in getting this work done is us listening and taking into account from the community's perspective.
Okay. And also, the Wilmington Community Advisory Council has what we call the population level results, and they are targeting the zip codes 19801, 19802, and 19805. Is there a reason why these zip codes are the prominent target areas? Is there something that was seen? Was there more crime, or was there just more prevention services that were needed in these zip codes? Talk to us a little bit about the population level results and what this entails.
Well, we listened to the data. We watched the data. And one of the things we did early on was we did a mapping of where the violent incidents were occurring and where the resources were, and tried to look at the distribution and the relationship between those. And that information really helped us to determine that those were the areas we wanted to focus in. Those were the areas that if we could better align the resources, and not just the formal resources, but the informal resources. The mom and pops out there, the people who want to help the kids on their block, and to bring alignment around that, to help those people to do what they're doing and give them a little more capacity to be able to do that, really kind of help drive our focus on those 3 zip codes. And then when we talked to our colleagues at United Way and in the Department of Health and Social Services and the Kids Department, we also learned that that's what their data was telling them. to go in terms of concentrating their efforts. So there was a lot of convergence of the data to be able to say this is where we need to focus, and also meant that our partners were aligning their efforts to work in those areas too, which helped us to really better leverage the resources that were available.
And if you look at those same populations, they're the same populations that suffer with high poverty in youth and families. It's the same population that has the disparities in education. It's the same neighborhoods that have the housing and blight issues. So all of the social ills major social ills that we are dealing with in the city of Wilmington are all in that same population. And that's something with the CDC kind of report kind of demonstrated to us, that those are some of the root causes of the trauma that our community is suffering from, which in most cases is resulting in the action of the gun violence, poverty, high unemployment, low graduation rates, homelessness, our housing situation. You name all of the factors of inequities that are social ills that are plaguing the Wilmington right now. That's where this highly populated in those areas and resulting in the gun violence.
And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, President Shabazz, because as often people think of the CDC, the Centers for Disease and Prevention, they often think of that as the place, the organization that actually just tells us about like the influenza or viruses and diseases that are happening in our communities. But you just made a list here. You just stated a list that is also associated with all the things that the CDC actually covers. Can you tie that in for us? I know you spoke to us about that, but there's also like trauma, but these are all the different layers that tackles what prevention and disease.
Food deserts, our food deserts, okay? Our cancer deserts, our asthma deserts, our housing deals still with lead paint are all those same zip codes. Our high infant mortality rates are all those same zip codes, which are all health issues, right? Okay, well, so is mental health. Physical health will result in mental health. And so for us to look at those population areas, we in our continued investigation, we had to tie in how do we resolve those other social ills that are plaguing those same areas, and do more preventive work to prevent those things. I got so much going on in my head that it's like, how do you tie it all together? I mean, it is the addressing all the social ills in a holistic manner, which is why our group of individuals from all sectors of the community, whether it's health, education, our hospitals, our prisons, our public safety, all coming together to address all of those social ills that has created an environment that our children have resulted in the disease of mental illness that's resulted in the gun violence.
That's right. And as we all know, it takes one step at a time. And this is perfect timing to have the two of you on the show, because as we all know, recently Mayor Purzycki had released the stats, the data in regards to, he and Police Chief Tracy, in regards to the gun violence in our community. And for 2019, the year-end report on policing and crime in Wilmington actually showed a total of 89 shooting incidents, reflecting an increase of 72 incidents that we had in 2018. So although we've seen a decrease in 2018, we saw an increase in 2019. So far in 2020, we're doing okay. How does the WCAC, because you guys are serving as advocates to really try to decrease the amount of shootings that are happening in our community. We know what the problems are. How is WCAC, like let's talk about the how now. How is WCAC working to attack this issue that's plaguing so many communities, not just ours?
We want to get on the rooftops and scream that we must do action ASAP, because those data shows also too that the children are getting younger that's doing this, which means we're trying to prevent the bleeding. We have individuals in the pipeline that are, first the shootings were a more mature age. Now the shootings become younger, so are we stopping the bleeding? Are we doing the preventive? Are we doing the intervention work? And so until we don't feel that we are, which is why we're still moving forward with it, because there's things that we know that we could put in place that are not in place yet. And as to why they're not, I don't know, because data demonstrates that it's needed, but that's another conversation. But that's why we keep doing it, and that everyone that keeps coming to the table to those 2 and 3 hour meetings and 2-hour meetings on the other side to continue to push the work. That's the reason why, because even if the numbers were going down, we're still trying to save another life. And we're hoping that we do it before the age even goes below the 14, 15, and 16-year-olds.
That's right. And a lot of education is involved. You only know what you know. So people might think of, oh, just meetings, meetings, meetings. But at these meetings, you're having educated individuals who are informing those who are just unaware of what can help their community, are unaware of what resources and services are available to them to help tackle those other issues you mentioned, like poverty, employment, mental illness, health, things of that nature. But here you're providing that opportunity for them.
Yeah, I think our colleague Henry Smith talks about random acts of innovation. We have a lot of good work going on, but it's like having a variety of arrows going in different directions. We're trying to help align those arrows and get them going in one direction, aimed at preventing those things that really address the social determinants that really impact violence, you know, and getting at the root issues here, and being able to impact those in a way that break those silos down and say, if we can work together, then we have a better shot, because we certainly can't do it alone, because what we've been doing wasn't working, and we've got to try some new things in order to see if working together can get us to that better result.
Right.
You know, we look at each other. We look at ourselves as the glue, I guess you would say, because the WCAC does not do services. What we are, we serve as a convener, a guide, and advisors from the information that we be able to garner from our various meetings and discussions and sharing of information and getting expertise from those who know more than us about particular subjects, that we have set what that best practice looks like. We see the assets that we have already in place and seeing things that have worked, and then the data proves that moves the needle. We try to be the glue that brings those organizations together to close the net that our children have been falling through. As Gwen mentioned, that all working in one area and taking down the silos, because we have to create a safe environment that's holistic, that's well padded, and easy to maneuver through, so that our families can get access to the services that they need, that the data proves that they are deficient of.
That's right. And that's what we're going to get back into after this short break. I really want to touch on, when we return, the trauma side of it, because there's a cause and effect for everything. And right now we're getting right into that. So we're going to talk about the trauma side, and we're going to get into the policies and things of that nature, and all the great things that WCAC continues to do. Good. So don't go away. We will be right back after these short messages.
Vision loss is not something that you feel until it happens.
Most people lose their vision from diseases like macular degeneration and glaucoma, not at birth.
3 million Americans have glaucoma, and half don't even know it.
11 million people in the United States have macular degeneration.
So many eye disorders can be treated if caught early.
Make a plan today to get your eyes checked.
Visit brightfocus.org to learn more.
The right to play on any playing field, you have earned it. The right to hold a job, you have earned it. The right to study in any school, you have earned it. The days of separation and segregation are over.
I don't remember how it started. Our back and forth. Victory. Fumble. Repeat. It always came back.
Okay, here we go, throw it!
Yeah. You probably don't remember what you told me.
That was perfect.
But I heard every word.
Nice.
Welcome back to In Focus. I'm your host, Yesenia Taveras. And if you're just now joining us, I'm here with President of Wilmington City Council, Hanifa Shabazz, and WCAC Coordinator, Dr. Gwen Angalet, as we're continuing the conversation on how the Wilmington Community Advisory Council is connecting resources to our communities with the goal to address the causes of gun violence in Wilmington, Delaware. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, so we've touched on so much before the break, but now let's get into a little bit about how this is a public health issue with the gun violence that is affecting our communities, and how that goes hand in hand with the CDC.
Yeah, it was really special, if you will, that the CDC accepted this request from the governor to come in and do this study. Because Congress has put severe limitations on the research that the CDC can do around gun violence. And so it had to be framed differently. It had to be framed as a population health issue. And they were coming in and using their research methods to address it and to look at it from that perspective. And with that, it really gave us a variety of, it kind of opened the doors to be able to look at this in a different way, and to realize that, you know, you had to tackle it from a variety of perspectives. It wasn't just one perspective of going out and stopping crime, you know, and focusing on public safety, but it was really looking at those root issues that that really precipitate and result in a young person picking up a gun, you know, and committing a violent act.
When I got into city council, I did try to do legislation dealing with, you know, the gun registration, you know, and you know how difficult dealing anything with gun rights is a major battle, and it's something I would always have to go to the state for. So I said, well, how about if we go and try to address what's causing our young people to me outside of their nature to pick up a gun and want to commit a heinous crime and to kill someone with it. So I went to, let's see if we can tackle why they are picking up a gun and maybe stop them, do the preventive work. And that's, I think, is, you know, take us right into where we are now is the preventive work. Our goal is to try to do prevention and intervention before the child gets to the traumatic state that's required to hunt out an illegal object such as a gun, and go up to and plan it all out and actually go up and take someone's life. That takes a strong mental anger that's deeply rooted into a lot of pain for a young child who hasn't really experienced life. I mean, what were we doing? We was 15, 16, 18 years old. We were fun and partying and having, you know, sports and drama and trying to figure out who we want to be. We weren't thinking about taking someone's life. That, to me, demonstrated that there was a mental problem that we're suffering from and what's causing that.
Right. And recently I saw a quote on Facebook of a young girl who lives here in Wilmington, and she's saying now to her peers that it's a death sentence if you go outside meaning outside now is looked at as the place where you don't go because you can get shot and killed.
Right.
And like as you mentioned, that's not how it was back in the day when we were growing up. Even myself, we went outside, rode bikes and things of that nature, made friends.
Yeah.
But now our younger generation is looking at it like it's a death sentence if you're walking in the wrong zip code,
Right.
wrong block,
Right.
if you're going off the wrong alley. Like it's just so many different layers to it. But the good thing about WCAC is that although we have targeted zip codes, you're looking at the whole spectrum, the bigger
Yes,
picture here
absolutely.
with the prevention work.
Absolutely.
And what's some of the things that you guys have seen since the inception of WCAC in regards to trauma? Because I know a lot of other work too that WCAC does is making sure that people are trauma informed. There's been training classes that's been happening. Over 60 youth serving professionals have already been trained, train the trainer. This is professionally educated individuals who are getting more educated on what trauma means, what does that look like in our city here, and how can we take it back home to the residents who are living in these zip codes in our communities and how we can help them. Talk to us a little bit about this and how WCA has played a role in this.
Well, one of the recommendations was to create an environment where our children felt safe. We first started off with the extended the safe havens in the community centers. But in doing that, they felt safe around the adults, but the adults needed to be knowledgeable that if the children are having a traumatic episode, you know, how do they respond to it? How do they de-escalate that instead of saying the child's being bad? What did you do wrong? You know, you're a bad child. We thought that it was important that those adults were knowledgeable of trauma-informed care so they could know how to best deal with the child who's having a traumatic episode. It can't be a safe haven if the child is not safe and can't go there, have one of their episodes and not feel that there's an adult that is going to reprimand them, but to nurture them and help them with their issue. So it was important that we trained the individuals, the staff of the community centers, and now with this training program, we're training even more individuals through this training informed care workshops.
Okay.
Yeah, I think one of the processes we used early on when we developed our recommendations was to think about how we could pilot, develop some pilots, test those pilots, and then take them to scale. And the trauma-informed practice work is a good example of that. Late last year, late 2018 and into 2019, we trained 139 people from 20 organizations in the basics around trauma-informed practice and the brain science. We started getting requests from a number of organizations saying, we would like to have this training. We couldn't handle it. And I must say that our partners in this process have been the Department of Education, the Kids Department, Health and Social Services, and United Way. And together, we worked together to put together this training program to train people from different organizations to take the information back to their organizations and to the community. In other words, you can build a capacity in the organization, but the ultimate goal is to get the information to the community so that people realize that the way they're feeling is that there's something that can that there are resources, there's support that can help them to address how they're feeling. And as President Shabazz was saying, it's not the bad kids, it's what happened to these kids that's causing them to behave in this way. So how do we help the helpers to help them and to know what to do, and then to where to go to get more help if what the child needs is beyond their capacity.
And because we're an epidemic proportion, per the Center for Disease Control, that means that we needed to blanket the city, cover the city with interventions and preventive medications. I always kind of look at we categorize the conditions. We felt that universally, we wanted to make sure that universally everybody got a vitamin. Every child got a vitamin based on how far they're involved in the trauma of the violence. And then there's individuals based on the investigative reports that a certain number of children indicated triggers that they were on their way down the path of possibly committing a crime. And then there's individuals who are definitely, have clearly demonstrated that they are in the stage of committing violence by gun. So we needed to make sure that I got a vitamin. Some children got an aspirin, and then other children got penicillin in the application of the support services or the best evidence practices that came out of this report. The issue, though, is because we're talking such volume for such, and this has been an infection for so long, because the educational system was the basis of what all of our young people are suffering from, an inequitable educational system, which is almost 30, 40 years old, which means this is multi-generational. That means we needed a very impressive, let me say this straight up, we needed a whole lot of money to be able to do what's necessary, an investment into the support services, into the organizations that are doing the best practices, to build capacity to deal with the volume that we're dealing with. And that's what we're hoping to be able to demonstrate from our resources.
And the great thing that
political resources, I guess you say.
Yes, definitely. And the great thing I love about the council is that everyone came together. We have state officials, we have local officials, you have the governor, the lieutenant governor, you have the Newcastle County executive. In the very beginning of this, the idea of having the Wilmington Community Advisory Council, everyone came on board and said, yes, Wilmington's having a tough time, but this is affecting the entire state. There's other areas
the entire country.
And the entire country as well, yes. So let's talk about the part in regards to policy. Like, how does WCAC advocate for policy changes? How are they joining hands in hands with other local officials and other organizations that are seeing things that could be changed to help the epidemic that's going on in our country, in our city, in any way, in any capacity?
I think there are two prime areas that as we were developing the recommendations, we sort of kept a running list of the policy issues that were popping up in our research and what we were hearing from folks. They focused in two areas. They focused on education reform and reform of our juvenile justice system. And so that's where we're focusing our advocacy efforts. We developed a policy agenda. This past year, in 2019, we focused on juvenile justice reform. We joined, locked arms, if you will, with the Smart Justice Coalition, and really became the voice for young people, for the juvenile side of that reform that was happening statewide. There was a lot of effort going on around reform over our overall justice system in this past legislative session. A lot of work in terms of focusing reforming the laws that related to adults. We were focused on the laws that related to children and youth, and became a voice for that, a collective voice. And I guess one of the things I always want to make sure we come back to is that when we talk about the Wilmington Community Advisory Council, it's not this one body here, it's the partners. We wouldn't be anything without the many wonderful partners that have said, we'll go shoulder to shoulder with you and work together to make this happen. And that's what then the advocacy that we did around reforming certain statutes that relate to youth in the justice system. That's really how that came about. So it takes time to make policy change in Delaware. Many bills will get introduced the first session of the General Assembly, and it takes 2 sessions to get them through. So we're kind of midway in that process. Some things that we supported in 2019 did pass. Some things are pending for 2020. And we'll be right there again, working closely with our partners to do that advocacy work on those. The other area that we'll be turning to in 2020 is in education reform. And what are those, what does that mean for making change there? Which means some of the attention focuses on the General Assembly, but a lot of attention focuses on school boards. And what does it mean to work with local school boards to change disciplinary policy? We're starting to explore that a bit. And we'll be working to sort of develop a plan, a path forward around that in the coming year.
And that's why our other focus also is community engagement, because as we continue to advocate and lobby for policy change, it's going to require the people that we're doing, the community that we're working and speaking on behalf of, to join us in our advocacy and lobbying. I think our legislators need to see that it's not just the WCAC and our partners who are saying that this is the policy changes that we need, but the community themselves are saying, yes, we do need these policy changes. And so I encourage our listening audience to follow what the WCAC is doing. We are open and welcoming everyone to get involved, and that the changes that we're going to make to have an environment for us to address the social ills that's plaguing those zip codes and really the city and the entire state and possibly the country, because there are other cities and states are looking at Wilmington and say, how do we resolve that? Because they're already wondering, how do we get the Center for Disease Control to come in to even address this? And I think the whole shift of looking at gun violence as a public health issue, is kind of generated from our work. And so we have to get it right for the sake of our children. We have to get it right for the next generation. And we have to get it right for the sake of Wilmington and the state of Delaware, because we are evolving. And but if our grassroots are sick, if the grassroots, the community, the people that what make a city be a city, if they're ill and they're suffering, I don't know how we can continue to build on that and think that we're going to have a stable and flourishing city of Wilmington. So I plead all those who are watching, I plead with my political colleagues that this is, if not as important of any other epidemic that's coming to our city, because it's the roots of who we are, that they get on board and get the political will to put the resources where they need to be to do the preventive and interventive work. Right now we are focusing on the young people who are, through the GIV. We're focusing on they're the indicated ones. I always get it mixed up.
They're indicated.
The indicated, okay, the indicated young people. But we're trying to stop the bleeding and stop not feeding the pipeline, as Dr. Gwen stated. We're working upstream, so we want to address and make sure that it is a safe and healthy environment for our young people to grow, that the educational system is providing, the support that they need, that our families, who are suffering from so many inequities are getting, some equal resources and access to resources, and that we are leveling the playing ground so everybody in Wilmington can enjoy this growth and development. So citizens, it's not just us, the WCAC or our partners. It's going to require the citizen support to assist us in the policy change, because policy change changes culture. If we just do programmatic change, that's just for the limited time of the program.
Right.
But policy change the culture of a community, and the next generation hopefully will be cured and healed from this disease.
Yes, and that's a great way to leeway right into the power and partnerships. WCAC has a component that's called People and Organizations in Wilmington Engaging in Reform Power. Let's talk a little bit about that. How can other organizations get involved? How can other individuals get involved who are watching and want to say, I want to have a part in this as well? Let's talk a little bit about power of the partners in relationships and partnerships with other individuals and organizations.
I want to give you an example of power in action. We've been working with a variety of organizations, including the Network Connect, Team Warehouse, the YMCA Youth Leadership Program, and other programs within the YMCA that are really engaging young people. And in those efforts, we bring young people together in workshops and talk to them about how their voice matters, and really talk to them about how important it is to step up and to pay attention to the issues that impact policy. And their thoughts are just as valid as anyone else's about what needs to happen. So we're trying to help them, I don't want to say it's sort of a civics lesson, a practical civics lesson, and how to exercise their voice and what does that mean, in the process. And that's an example of the power of partnerships. Any organization, we welcome all comers. All they have to do is reach out. They can send us a message on our through our website. We're on Facebook, Power and Wilm. They can, when we hear from them, we'll follow up with them. We'll put them on our mailing list. We have 4 major full council meetings a year. The next one's coming up February 10th. We meet at the Howard High School. We had been having meetings in other locations in the city, but we said, you know what? We're going to take our meetings to the young people. So we started having our meetings at Howard High School. and it's really helped us to engage more young people directly in the efforts of the council by taking it to them. But people are welcome. 3 o'clock, February 10th. We welcome to come out and be a part of that.
You know, our young people are they love brands. You know, so so our partners, you know, we show that we are a member of power, and maybe a young person may go to one of our young workshops and events that we've had held at the library and other places, and they said, wow, I had a really good time, and that's a great place where I can really get some great information and help build myself up. And so they start seeing that power logo in different locations. They might not know the host organization, but they see that logo and say, oh, well, they might be cool also, and hopefully then they would go to those different organizations. So trying to use what our young people use in talking to each other, and most of the things is brands and you know, the social media type of contact, because you have to go the level where the young people are, and that's our goal, to get them engaged. So then if you become a member of power, you know, that helps to connect the dots again of the various resources that are available and organizations that's doing things that are you know, beneficial, positive youth programming, and you know, and get the attention of our young people, because that's where they say, where can I go to find, you know, programs, where can I go to find events, and you know, just being able to look for that symbol of power will help guide our young people to those events.
Right, and the Wilmington Community Advisory Council has, I think, 3 youth ambassadors who are there right at the table with you.
We've had more.
More now?
More.
Oh, I can imagine.
We had 3 youth ambassadors. We have sort of broadened reshaped our thinking a bit on that, and realized that having young people as members of our council, members of our steering committee, that was really the best ways to engage them. And yes, there's Darius. He went down this road with us in the beginning, and now he's a part of the community intervention team, working out there with young people, trying to help them to find their way, so to speak.
And I was going to say, talk to us a little bit about the community intervention team and how they're doing outreach in the streets. What does that look like? And you have these young people involved.
Well, like we said, one of the major recommendations was for not only to find a safe environment for our young people, but for our young people to find an adult they could trust. So that if they don't have that at home, that there's somebody they can talk to help work them through any kind of disputes they may have. So the community intervention team is made up of just peers of young people already in the streets, some of them who have gone down the wrong path and gotten themselves straight and know how to maneuver your way out of it. And it's just adults who care. And so they're out there intervening, as their title says, with the young people in the effort to try to prevent or intervene a conflict between some young people that might result in the shooting and death of someone by gun. So it's important, I mean, that we have people on the streets where you have to go where the issue is. So there are health doctors, I would say, they're out in the community going right into the trenches where this dysfunction and trauma area is, and trying to intervene and prevent and cure some of the disagreements that our young people have that are resulting in gun violence. So we're very proud of the team. They come with life experience, more than you can learn in any book, because they've been down the road before, and they feel that they're contributing tremendously back to the community. Do we have enough of them on the streets based on the numbers? No, but we're growing, and again, I'm pleading for that continuous, support from all facets of the community to ensure that we have the resources necessary to address the epidemic that we're dealing with.
And that's a beautiful thing to hear, especially with the work that you're doing with the youth who are transitioning into rehabilitation services and things of that nature. It's truly showing it takes a village. It takes everyone coming together to help each other. And what better way to talk about it right here in the beginning of the new year, because we do have to lift others up. We do have to be, we're going to be our best advocates for one another, especially in a time where our country is seeing so many bad things happening.
And I'm not talking about just government as my colleagues. I'm talking about the business community. I'm talking about the nonprofit community. I'm talking about the a faith-based community, all of us have a role to play in making a safer environment for our young people to thrive. Employment is another factor, root cause of some of it. So, just trying to get the employment opportunities for our young people and for their families, to deal with the poverty that's stricken in those same zip codes.
And before we leave, we've touched on so many different components here within this hour. Some of the things that are plaguing our communities, the things that are affecting our communities, how WCAC has been taking its role to making sure they address these problems. What would you say would be the return on investment? If one were to sit here and say, oh, well, what has WCAC really done? We've talked so much, but what could you say in these last few minutes, or could you add in regards to the return on investment here for the Wilmington Community Advisory Council?
The saving of our children. A equitable, well-balanced educational system with the necessary social services that are required to continue developing strong families, strong community, a healthy community. It's not just one facet. It's health, it's food, it's housing, it's safe streets, it's civic engagement. It's all of the components that makes a community that's necessary and equitably in those particular neighborhoods, so that we have an environment. That our children were the only species that's forced to leave its nest before it can fly, with our busing situation. So making what's necessary to equalize that. I don't know how you do it because it's several generations thick, other than knowing that that's the issue and then providing an educational system that addresses that, which would then prepare those individuals to be that workforce that's necessary to continue Wilmington growing, which then results in the addressing the poverty and the wealth inequities that we have, and then just brings a cleaner, better community, our housing stock, because you're taking pride into your neighbor. So all of that just builds a community. Mm-hmm. So I believe us bringing attention to the root cause of that, to identifying the evidence-based programs, identifying the training, the people who deal with our young people through the trauma-informed care training. I think that is the return on investment, and we see the seeds that's grown out of our work growing in some of the partners that Dr. Gwen spoke about.
And Dr. Gwen, anything else you would like to add?
I think the ultimate return on investment we won't see for a while. And I think the thing that we try to keep encouraging people to realize is this is not a quick once and done. Mm-hmm. You can't just say, well, I put some dollars here, so check the box, I've done that. You've got to be able to look at investing in the entire system mm-hmm. in order to be able to really reap the value. So we may not see it now or next year or 5 years from now. This kind of change takes decades to make the systemic change we're talking about. But every day that we help save one person's life, one young person's life, any person's life, to me that's the ultimate return on investment. And to see that our kids and our families have an opportunity to thrive and that they have hope. They have hope for another day and hope that this world, that they can make a difference.
That's right. And then the more we see everyone coming together, everyone's having a seat at the table, that's even something more of encouraging for all of us to look forward to.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Gwen Angalet and President Hanifa Shabazz, for joining us on this episode of In Focus and really just giving so much insight on Wilmington Community Advisory Council. I look forward to all the work that we're going to be seeing in 2020.
Thank you.
Thank you. And for those of you who are watching, if you want to stay along and keep on top of what the Wilmington Community Advisory Council is doing, feel free to visit them at www.wilmcommunityadvisorycouncil.org. You can get all the latest information there. And on behalf of all of us here at WITN 22, I've been your host, Yesenia Taveras. Thank you so much for watching.